Hello everyone, status update on Froooog the RS4. We got the transmission out and everything looked like was in good shape. The clutch was definitely gone, so you can see here the stock dual mass flywheel, actually with a lot of rust. Not much material left on the disc itself, and of course the little hot spots on the pressure plate. The springs were already tired on the pressure plate, so the clutch was slipping. And so here to remove the clutch is a good ACT video. Basically you have to drop the exhaust and drop the drive shaft, remove the two heat shields here. The shifter selector has a mount on each side, so one here and one here. You remove those and you can pop the shifter selector out. The axle shaft, you have a shield and bolts. They are not super easy to access, and all around the engine you have bolts, except the three at the bottom that are from the front, and there is no room to get there, so you have to fiddle lifting up the engine. But when you get that out here, we already have installed the new single mass Chrome-Moly flywheel from JHM Motorsports, and we'll complete the install with a stage 3 R clutch. And here we are going to replace the slave cylinder with a rubber line that is here. And you can see the if you have to do that with the transmission in the car, that's pretty much impossible. There is no room to get there. So the slave cylinder that is the original is plastic, and the rubber line, we're going to replace that by the kit from USP Motorsports here that has a braided line, and the Sachs metal aluminum slave cylinder. And here you can see the part that has been removed: the exhaust, the drive shaft, and the shield. We removed the brace on the transmission cradle, and the rest of the shields are here on the shaft, and that's the shield on the drive shaft. And you loosen also the sway bar to get access to the bolts in the front. So here's what it looks like. Another little detail here, the work from our friend at Cast Competition, who did the backing plates for the belts. So you see that's where the belts are mounted inside the car. The new anchoring point with the backing plates here. And here you can leave the axles in place to move the transmission. That doesn't pose a problem. Same thing, the headers, it's a bit tight to get some of the bolts with the headers in place, but everything fits. So this is the stage 3 JHM Motorsport R series clutch. So you have on the pressure plate side, you have a regular organic disc, and on the flywheel side, you have a metallic disc. So kind of the hybrid version. So instead of having the dual mass original flywheel with this kind of clutch pack in between for smoothness of engagement, we have Chrome-Moly single piece flywheel that is actually 11 pounds lighter than the stock flywheel. Stock flywheel is 26, this is 15 pounds. And here you can see the tabs for the crankshaft signal. Comes with new bolts, pilot bearing already installed. So here we are talking to 65 foot-pound. You can see the prior bar holding the flywheel on that side. And you start with a start pattern, and then you go all around at the end to recheck every bolt. The last step is to torque the pressure plate bolts. We torque them at 33 foot-pound. Here we go. And you start in a start pattern, and you finish by checking them by going all around. And here we are with the clutch in place, and now the transmission will be going back in. So the stock camshaft sensor was stuck here in the spacer. We couldn't get it out. There is an O-ring at the bottom, and even with a pry bar we couldn't get it out. So we ended up leaving it in the gearbox, and so the edge got broken against the side wheel when we pulled the gearbox out. So you can get this replacement from Amazon, the Walker, that has exactly the same reference, for 18 bucks. Or so that's exactly the same thing. Or you can try to buy the genuine one for 250 bucks. Okay, so we cleaned up the transmission. Kevin is finishing cleaning the pivot point with the throat bearing here. So here we cleaned everything inside. There is a lot of grime that accumulated around the camshaft sensor hole and also through the slave hole. So cleans up good. So when you remove the transmission, that's where your camshaft sensor is set up. Here you have the bolts for the slave cylinder. Here it's one bolt for one side of the shifter linkage, the bolt for the other side of the shifter linkage. This is the connector you have to disconnect. That's where your O2 sensors connector are connected. If you can't get them down, you can bend the tabs down to get the connectors out. And here, that's the bolt for the hole for the bolt of the shifter linkage here, the vertical one. Otherwise, you have one bolt on each side for the shifter linkage that are this guy and this guy. So those are the ones you really have to go blind to get. And also the two bolts of the transmission, you have to get a long extension to get them from the back. The rest is relatively accessible. So now we are going to get back to putting the new throat bearing in here, greasing the pivot points and where the throat bearing is. We put some Loctite back on this bolt, the new throat bearing, and grease in the back here, in the back of what is going to apply, grease around here and grease the splines. And so this part is going to be ready to go back, and the slave that pushes on the pivot point is going to come through this hole. Okay, so we have the slave, metal slave. It's a Sachs unit. They did grind off part of the part number for some reason, probably so that people didn't figure out they were overcharging for it. They gave us a wrong line in the kit. So you have an adapter feeding. Here it's actually the line they gave us. The same thing was the wrong threads. So I took a spare line that I had to connect the, those are coarse threads on the coming on the hard line. But we managed to find in our spare ready parts a line that would fit. So now we are all set. We did bleed the slave, and we are going to be ready to install. Nothing is leaking. And next step is to put the transmission back on. Status update on where we're at tonight. So transmission is back in. All the upper housing bolts are in and torqued. We're able to put the shifter linkage back on. The clutch slave, which was a real pain. And even worse, the crankshaft sensor finally finished after an hour, putting the shield back on. So that's complete. So now we still have the 3 bolts at the bottom in the front here. Still have to tuck in the line for the slave in a way that it's not going to be too close to the exhaust. So I still have to figure that out because they gave us the wrong line, and we used one of my lines that was much longer. So one of the tricky part of the transmission job is putting those 3 lower bolts at the bottom of the transmission, which you have to put back from the front where the pouring steering line is in the way here. So to be able to get in there to put the bolts back or remove them if you are removing the trans, you are going to have to maintain the rear of the transmission up. And so you can just use the bolts here, or you can put a jack at the back to hold that up. And to lift the front here, I'm just using my transmission jack on the oil pan, and you will see the motor mount here getting off the motor mount. Yeah, we're starting to separate a bit here. And actually this side came more than the other side, so I might, the driver side is lifting more, so I'm going to start on that side. That's going to give me a tiny bit more clearance. So some of the tricks to get better access: first disconnect your sway bar to so that it doesn't get in the way. Then you can loosen the clamp on this bracket here, so that you can pry your AC line out of the way. And I just use a little ratchet to hold it to the sway bar so that it stays here. And now I have an opening here to get my ratchet through. So here you have the bolts here with that's 8mm Allen. So another trick to get the bolt in, you can use a swivel like this and put your socket, and it might be easier with the swivel to get the right angle to get originally the bolt in the hole. Once you are able to push the bolt in the hole, the swivel like this gives too much of an angle and it makes it super hard to rotate. So if you can get away with just 2 wobble sockets to get it started by hand, it's much easier. And then to finish it, I use this little swivel extension that keeps in line way more, and at the end I'm able to tighten with this setup. So remember that to get in, you will always have to go first through here. So even to access the middle bolt, I'm going through here first. Okay, socket behind the power steering line, and then you arrive here at the top. Once you are inside, you move forward and then you rotate, and you can get to the bolt here. See, this is a center bolt here. So here is the job complete. The gearbox back in, the axle. Do yourself a favor for the shields here at the top. I just put the bolts on each side, but the one at the top in the center is so hard to reach that I just didn't put it back in. This way it's going to be much easier to service next time. I put paints to mark my bolts everywhere. They have been torqued to make sure nothing is backing off. So over there you can see the clutch line, I mean the slave clutch line over there. I did shield it. I get some light in there. I did put some exhaust shield around it with a metallic zip tie to protect it from the heat from the header. And routed the line at the top above the transmission. You can see part of the line coming back here. Because my line was too long, so I just put the excess line here where it's not too hot above the transmission. The wires from the O2 sensors, which also are a mess because they are way too long for some reason. So I bundled that here, trying to shield that from the exhaust with the transmission cradle. Here are your O2 sensor connectors. But other than that, everything went back pretty smoothly. None of the bolts were rusty. I put some anti-seize back, but everything was pretty easy to do. And now that we have a technique for those 3 bolts at the bottom of the transmission, it's not too bad of a job. So same thing, motor mounts, the paint to mark the bolts, and car started right up on the first try, and the clutch felt good. The car was moving back and forth. So JHM Motorsport tried to sponsor us to give us a discount on the clutch, but with their discount the price was still higher than ECS tuning, so we bought with ECS tuning.